Now, we know the Patriots, they're going after the central bank. Behind the scenes, in the shadows, they are making their move. Most of the public doesn't even know this is going on. But we can see that the central bank, they're not just going to say, hey, you know what? It's fine. Take us over. We don't care. We know the central bank never wants to give up control. They like to control the narrative. They don't like to lose. And we are now seeing the central bank, they're trying to fight for the narrative. They want everyone to believe that we're heading into a global recession because of this event. Not because of the central banking system. Not because of the debt, not because of the way their system works, but because of a certain event. Now, this has been their plan from the very beginning. And they're trying to push this narrative out there. But there's going to be a problem. Because when all this is said and done, and the event goes away, and the U.S. is not in a recession, the U.S. bounces back, what happens then? The rest of the world is in a recession, but the U.S. isn't? What's the reason for it? So we have the IMF out there right now, and that's the International Monetary Fund. They officially declared that the global economy has entered a recession as a result of the spread of this latest event. And they said it's because this event has now shut down all economic activities. It seems that this might have been planned from the very beginning. Shut down all economic activities, bring everything to a screeching halt. This way they can explain why the entire system is in a recession, it is crashing, moving into a depression. Trump and the Patriots, they're using this to their advantage. They knew the playbook. They knew what they needed to do here, and they turned the tables on the central bank. Now, Trump was in a phone conference with Putin. They're talking about oil prices. They're talking about the event. They're talking about how we need to work together to get through this. And this is what they said. They discussed options for closer cooperation between the two countries in this sphere. And they are now working together. And I do believe it's not just Putin. I do believe it's Xi and many others that are working together to bring down this central bank system. And if you really look at it, oil is continually falling in price. It's going lower and lower every single day. And there are economists out there that are predicting that this latest event could lead to the end of the euro currency and potentially the end of the European Union itself. Now, very interestingly, out in Italy, we have an Italian politician, Fabio Rampelli. He put up a video of him removing the EU flag from his chambers, and he replaced it with a national one. What does this tell you? I do believe this is setting the entire European Union up to start to say, okay, we need to protect ourselves. We need to remove ourselves from the European Union. And I believe this has just begun. Think about what happened with the UK. They broke away. Now this is giving all other countries the excuse to say, you know something? The UK did it. We're in this event. We can do it too. Now, Trump, we know that he's been trying to push tax cuts, which he's been getting. He's been deregulating. We know that he wanted to have a payroll tax cut where no one would pay taxes during this period of time. And I believe all of this is being done on purpose to get people used to not paying taxes, because you ever want to go back to taxes after you're not paying taxes on your income? He also wants Congress to restore the full tax deduction for meals and entertainment. He's reversing everything very, very quickly. This is all in preparation of moving completely away from the central bank. And we know that Trump and the Patriots, they're in the process of nationalizing the central bank, the Federal Reserve. And Real Eyes explained it really well. And I'm going to read Real Eyes' tweet and what he had attached, or she had attached to the tweet here. But let me just read the top part. It says, yes, special purpose vehicle will siphon all the debt from the American people to the Fed over 6 months. The Fed will die in bankruptcy court. Maybe the initial meaning of drain the swamp. Goodbye income tax, goodbye IRS. Now, down below, Real Eyes explains it pretty darn well of what is going on. So let me read what Real Eyes put out. As the federal government goes into overdrive to dish out money to the people and businesses who have been harmed by the criminal cabal scheme, the Federal Reserve is buying up that new debt. The U.S. government borrows the money by issuing bonds, and the Federal Reserve is buying those bonds, but the Federal Reserve is now geared up to buy way more bonds than just this amount. The Federal Reserve is buying at a massive pace. There is already more than $22 trillion in federal bond debt. The Federal Reserve is buying $625 billion per week, or $2.5 trillion per month. Some of that is in new debt because of all the massive new spending, but the rest is buying other U.S. debt if they keep up that buying pace. Who exactly owns the federal debt? There are two types of federal debt: marketable securities and non-marketable securities. Non-marketable securities are just a paper game where the U.S. government borrows from the left pocket to put into the right pocket. Back when Clinton was president, they claimed they had a budget surplus. It was a lie. They had shifted debt between the Social Security Trust Fund and the regular budget. In reality, total debt increased during the time because they were using real borrowed funds to pretend it was revenue. Anyway, these funds owed by the U.S. government to the U.S. government are non-marketable securities. They are not traded on the markets because they are just debt on the books, left pocket, right pocket. They are an accounting gimmick. The marketable securities, however, are real debt. The U.S. government has not had a real budget surplus in many decades. It constantly spends more than it takes in as revenue, and the difference is borrowed each year. That's why the national debt is over $22 trillion. Currently, the marketable securities are about $17 trillion of the $22 trillion, and the other $6 trillion are these non-marketable securities. What these special purpose vehicles might be is a 1-2 punch to take down the Federal Reserve and eliminate the income tax. As the Federal Reserve prints money to fund these special purpose vehicles, which buy up corporate bond and other non-government assets, the Federal Reserve is also printing money to buy up U.S. Treasury debt at $2.5 trillion in purchases per month. If the Federal Reserve is buying the real debt and not the fake debt, then they will own all of it in about 7 months, right around the time of the election. Of course, if they are also using that new money to buy up the new bonds being printed because of the stimulus bill, then it would take a little bit longer. If they are also using the same money to fund the special purpose vehicles, then it will take longer still. But sooner or later, the Federal Reserve will end up owning all of the debt, either directly or by issuing loans to the special purpose vehicles. You see, instead of everybody else being in debt to the Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve will be in debt to everyone else. And then Congress passes law abolishing the Federal Reserve and letting it die in bankruptcy court. In bankruptcy court, all of its transactions for the past however many years would be made available to the trustees and ultimately the public to learn what they've been doing with all that money all these years. The U.S. Treasury then takes over the printing presses, but backed by gold. Over time, and without interest-bearing money, the federal government could get back to its constitutional limitations, and Congress could abolish the income tax. This would be such a mind-blowing phenomenon to the general public that they would have no choice but to wake up. And the Fed. And we need to remember that the Federal Reserve, it's a private corporation. And if this private corporation goes bankrupt, who do we know that has a huge amount of experience in bankruptcy defaults? Who knows how to maneuver around everything? Trump. They have set the central bank system up. They're prepared and ready to make their move. And once everything's all said and done, once they get the Fed where they want it, everything is going to change. Remember, without getting rid of the central bank, not just here in the United States, but around the world, nothing will change. Everything comes from the central bank system. Remember, it's a system where they just create currency out of thin air, a private corporation, and they loan it to governments. Think of the IMF, loaning currency to different governments around the world. Where do they get the currency? They create it. What are they really loaning? Nothing. Think about the ECB. Why do you think they centralized it? And now everyone that's part of the EU, they loan the currency to all these countries. It's called control. The Federal Reserve, the same thing. They loan the currency to the U.S. government. And as they loan this currency, there's interest attached. Who has to pay the interest? The people. The question is, why is there interest attached? What's the reason for it? They're just creating it out of thin air. Why do they attach interest to it? Why do we even need them if they're creating currency out of thin air? We don't. Yes, I know the mainstream media and all the financial pundits out there, they try to explain why we need them to make sure that the economy is on the right track, to make sure that things don't go wrong. But in reality, there's no reason to have them. That's the excuses. That's what they wanted us to believe. That's the story they've been telling us. Now the world is waking up and we're starting to realize they serve absolutely no purpose to the people of the world. There is no reason to have a central bank establishment. There is no reason to have a private corporation loan the people currency and have the people pay taxes to pay interest on that currency. There is absolutely no reason. And Trump and the Patriots right now, and not just Trump and the Patriots, but all the other leaders around the world, they're prepared and ready to bring the entire central bank system down. You just can't bring one of them down. You got to bring down the entire organization. And that is what all of this is about.